for the next 20 minutes.
Thank you very much, Emma. Thank you. We're going to do our best with our microphone limitations. Do you want to check if that?
Yeah.
Can you hear
Can you
Keith?
hear me okay? Yeah. Fine. No, not really.
No.
We'll switch microphones.
We'll share the mic. That's going to be easier. Let's sit down and share the mic. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to be here. I think this is an extraordinary exhibition. For those of you who don't know, and why should you, I make a long-running, and now I can say very successful, series on YouTube about electric vehicles, renewable energy, the new energy industry that we're seeing here. We've been covering it for 8 years, over 300 shows, 300,000 subscribers, about 2 million views a month, so it's growing very rapidly. There's an enormous amount of interest in this sector. We know now for really concrete reasons. Weekend before last, we ran the first fully charged live exhibition at Silverstone. We were hoping for 2,000 ticket sales, and so that it wouldn't be embarrassing. 7,500 people walked through the door. We caused an electric car traffic jam on the A43, which we're very proud of, and the police rang up and asked why all these electric cars were stuck on the road, because the entrance to Silverstone couldn't take that number of cars. An amazing event, which shows that there's enormous public interest in renewables and the new energy dynamic that's emerging. So I'm very pleased to be here, and also I'm very pleased to have someone on the table next to me who actually knows stuff. I go around and talk to intelligent and clever engineers, but I'm quite thick, and that's been a professional skill of mine for many years, and I'm very proud of it. But I love meeting people who actually know stuff, and Keith actually knows stuff, so I'm really excited to hear what he has to say. I mean, the main thing that we really got the feeling of at that exhibition last week was the interest and the thirst for understanding of how a new energy economy might work. So distributed generation, people who generate power and store it in their own homes, how you charge cars, how the whole thing fits together. It isn't just about cars like we used to know, with glossy adverts of one car driving up a Scottish road, which 99% of the population never do, and how they charge and how they can be integrated into your house. And that seems to be really what we're talking about. So Keith, can you give us a background on the kind of what I'd love to hear about is the big energy picture, not just renewables, not just cars, not just solar panels, not just wind, but how all those things can be integrated.
All right, brilliant, thank you. So I was going to try and outdo you with numbers there for a minute, because I think what you said about your electric vehicles and the interest in energy and people's enthusiasm for it is growing and growing and growing. And last weekend we had an open day at Whiteley Wind Farm, and 6,000 people came along. Wow! 6,000 people on a Sunday to come and look around a wind farm. We had various activities, but it does show you if you set these things up, if we invite people, actually people want to learn more about what's going on. They love the whole concept of renewables. I think electric vehicles is, in many ways, it's an absolute godsend for the energy sector, because people love cars. They love the whole idea of transport, the whole idea of being able to get places. It's an integral part of their lives. And again, for the energy sector and everybody involved in the energy sector, that's a fantastic thing, because it engages people into the conversation. And if we can get people drawn into the conversation around electric vehicles, that means we can also engage them in the whole conversation about energy efficiency, about renewables, about decarbonisation, which are sometimes more difficult topics to engage people in. So it's just, it's a really, really good way in. So what's going on in the whole sector just now? Everybody's very familiar with the fact that we're decarbonising, we're going from coal to gas to renewables. We've been doing that really, really well. But there's a whole lot of other stuff going on in the background that maybe people aren't quite as familiar with, around the transmission system and around the distribution system and how we reconfigure those, because we are shifting from large, big, centralised generating plants to distributed generation. We're trying to make a shift towards having what people would call smart cities, where instead of managing the entire system, you're managing distribution in local areas. A lot of people talking about going from distribution network owners to distribution system operators, where the whole system becomes much more interactive, and it's much more about what customers want, what local businesses want, what local stakeholders want out of the energy system to help grow the economy, to help change people's lives. So there's a whole ton of stuff going on in there. And electrification of transport just accelerates, excuse the pun, but it accelerates all of that conversation, because as you start to roll out electrification of transport, you need to make a lot of changes to the distribution system. Fast charging, which is the way the car industry is trying to push life, that creates huge peaks on the distribution system. So we need to run it and manage it and invest in it in a very different way. We need to look at actually how will people use cars going forward, because I actually think that's going to change. So everybody's sitting here, the car industry is sitting just now, trying to convince people to buy an electric vehicle and use it like a normal car. So they want to charge it as quickly as possible. They theoretically want to drive 450 miles, etc., etc. They want to stop at a station, plug it in and drive off again. And the reality is, I don't know that that's the reality. I don't know that's the way people, I don't even know it's the way people drive cars right now. I think there's lots of statistics out there that will tell you 85, 90% of journeys, I think, are less than 15 miles. But apparently we all obsess about being able to go 450 miles in an electric car. I think actually the people I know and people you talk to who've already got electric vehicles, and we have a fleet of them at work, people actually tend to be charging them, slow charging them overnight, not actually fast charging them. So I think, although those things are being used very much as a targeting exercise by the car industry, I think the reality of what people will do and how people will use it is very, very different. I also think demographics are changing so fast. If you look at youngsters now, when I was young, when you were young, you hit the age of 17, your rite of passage was go and pass your driving test, go and buy a car. That's not happening anymore. It's just not happening anymore. And I think the whole ethos of owning a car or having your own car is going to change. I think the whole thing around car clubs and people signing up to car clubs, I think will become much, much more popular. So I think the challenge for the energy sector is not just how do you plan and cope with electrification of transport, is how do you plan and try and predict the change in people's behaviours. And it's a massive, massive exercise, but a lot of fun.
Very good, because I think one of the key things that I've certainly learned in the last 8 years is the integration. We almost need a new name to describe the thing that we sit in that's got 4 wheels and a battery and a motor and seats and keeps you warm when it's raining. And it's not really a car anymore. It's really a mobile computer and battery and an energy storage system. And I mean, that's the thing that created the most excitement in the last few weeks is the first couple of domestic vehicle-to-grid units that have been released. That are still going to be expensive. It's only going to be used by a few fanatics like me. But that once you understand that system and you can then move 2 or 3 days worth of domestic energy around in your car and run your house from it, the whole picture changes dramatically. I mean, that's going to be. I think a lot of these things are a huge challenge to the to the traditional energy industry. That we supply power here, it goes along really expensive wires where we lose half of it anyway. It goes into substations where we lose a bit more. That system is now so already out of date, and I mean that it's the. I'm intrigued by the challenge to the actual infrastructure. How much work has to be done to that to make it usable?
Yeah, and it is here we go. We've got 2 microphones. Look at that. There's innovation for you. Good.
It doesn't work. Oh, it does work. Oh, good. There we go. It's even better.
So there's look. You're absolutely right. There's a massive challenge, but I think one of the things I keep saying to people in the energy sector is everybody tends to talk about, oh God, this is going to be difficult. This is going to be challenging. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah. Right. Oh, that's
okay.
Good.
So this is a great thing. It's a great thing for the energy sector. It's a great thing for the UK. It's a great thing for the environment. So. Let's not remember all the positives out of doing it. Yes, we need to change the way we run the distribution system. We need to change the way we invest in it, etc. And a lot of that will be determined by how people end up using electrification of transport, their cars, public transport as well, and the whole electrification of public transport. And as I say, we'll need to think carefully about how we map that out and how we plan that out. And then there is the whole issue of, do cars become storage vehicles as well? Are you linking them back into your house? Do you have that charging facility at home and the 2-way metering? And then along with smart metering, because smart metering is also going to be a massive innovation once it's finally all installed and all the systems are up and running, because we become incredibly data rich.
Yeah.
And the use of that data, along with electrification of transport, completely changes what we're doing. It completely changes what consumers are doing. So just, simple statistic, 50 million meters in the UK. They get read 4 times a year just now. It's 200 million bits of data. 50 million smart meters getting read every 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's 90 billion, I think it is, bits of data.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, it's an exponential growth. And the people who can analyze that, the people who can interpret it, look at how people are living their lives, and then you link that to transport, all of a sudden you can remap the way people are working, the way they're living. You can change what kind of products you're offering people.
Right.
And it is a little bit akin, I think, to the change that happened in telecoms a number of years ago, where the old infrastructure was there. You used to go and buy telephone calls, and that's what people obsessed about, was the cost of a telephone call. And now in a world where theoretically telephone calls are free, no one pays for a telephone call, you buy a device, it gives you access to entertainment. And you can see that kind of wholesale change happen to the energy sector, that actually the background product is like a utility, but what people are engaging with are ways of running their life, ways of running their house, ways of getting A to B, and that's all linked by an energy system, but it's an energy system that runs very, very differently than the one today and the one people are used to, and therefore the way people engage with energy companies is completely different.
Yes.
Because just now, most of that, or a lot of that engagement is around a meter reading and a bill. All of a sudden it completely changes because your energy provider is part of a system that's helping you run your house, it's helping you run your life, it's helping you run your transport. It's an integral part of what you do and where you go and how you get there.
Yeah.
That's a big, big change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is. I think the other thing is that I heard this statistic last week. There's already 100 million electric vehicles running on the roads of the world, and I think, God, there's not that many cars. No, they're not cars. They're mainly scooters, electric scooters, mainly in China. But there are already 180,000 electric buses in use in the world. Most of those are in China. So public transport. I mean, the Chinese. It's a slightly different political structure, we have to admit. The Chinese government said all buses must be electric, so they were. So that's quite an easy way of doing it. But but I think we're going to see those changes first. We're going to see delivery. So there's a company we're going to go and see soon who have just bought 1,000 electric vans to do deliveries around the outskirts of London. They deliver groceries and milk and stuff like that. The post office have just ordered. The post office have just ordered 500 electric delivery vehicles at last, because they've done the economics and they've worked out that they are doing a circuit, going back to the depot, charging, doing so. It's really easy for them, and it saves them hundreds of millions of pounds a year. So the whole economy is going to change. The structure of the economy, where people are employed, where jobs will be created, as we've seen here. The amount of jobs that have been created with offshore wind is mind-boggling, and the general public are fairly unaware of that, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, once you start getting fleet companies looking at electrification of transport and looking at electrifying their fleet, that is a colossal percentage of the vehicles out there on the road. And the other thing that will drive incredibly quickly is bringing the cost down. And that's one of those. It's like all these things. There's lots of people running around now trying to predict the increase in the percentage of uptake of electric vehicles, and you can virtually guarantee we've all got it wrong.
Yeah.
And no one's going to predict it well. And if you look back in history at new technology, what tends to happen is it just hits a balancing point, a tipping point, and then the growth becomes exponential. Yeah. And I think that's the bit that no one really knows. When's that going to happen? Is it price parity? Is it the range issue?
Yeah.
Is it
even cars?
Absolutely.
It might not even be cars.
But then the growth could come so quickly, and that's where the real challenge comes around the distribution system, around the energy system, is can it cope with that upsurge? So it's about how do you make that upfront investment, but how do you do that upfront investment without the age-old risk of stranded assets, of investing in stuff that it turns out we don't really need.
Yeah.
And that's what all the planning and all the clever has to go into. Working with politicians, with regulators, local communities, with the transport department, etc., is trying to map out how do you do that and when do you do it and when do we make all of that investment. So, nice, simple example. One of the things that they talked about in Scotland is that you electrify the A9. For those of you who don't know Scotland particularly well, the A9 runs up the length of Scotland. Concept being, if you electrify the A9, everywhere in Scotland is within 100 miles of the A9.
Right.
Therefore, you can go anywhere in Scotland in an electric car.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Brilliant. But how do you electrify the A9? If you even just look at one of the big service stations at the start of the A9, if you put 10 fast charging points at it, ultra fast charging points, then you probably right now need to build a £15 million substation next to it.
Right.
The system can't cope with that.
Yeah.
And that's why we need to be careful about how we plan it out. That's why we need to be careful about trying to understand and trying to shape people's behaviour about how they use these vehicles going forward.
Yeah.
As I say, people are kind of obsessed just now about wanting to charge them incredibly quickly, but is that really what they're going to do?
Yes. No, it isn't.
And I doubt it is.
No.
But we can the energy sector can influence that as well hugely in terms of the way we sell the product, the way we incentivize it in terms of charging overnight becomes cheaper than charging during the day. Fast charging, there's a premium for. Slow charging, there's a discount for. You can manage people's behavior in various ways. And then the other massively important bit and very, very relevant to this conference, and I was saying this last night at dinner, sometimes the offshore sector is a little bit isolated from the rest of what's going on in the world of energy. And I think one of the things and one of the great sales pitches for offshore is actually offshore is going to drive the future of the electrification of transport and potentially heat as well.
Yeah.
And that's a massive opportunity for offshore, because where else is all this power going to come from? Because it has to come from renewables.
Yeah.
And right now offshore is a colossal part of that future. And that drive as we hit electrification, and then looking at more sensible ways of connecting offshore wind farms up, more sensible ways of doing the grid connections. We're running them all point to point. We could change all of that as well.
Right.
So massive program.
I mean, I do like that very much. It's a thing that I don't. Some of you may have seen a series I did for Channel 4 many years ago called Scrap Heap Challenge, and it was a great example of you face a human being with what seems like an insoluble and complicated problem, and I as a not an engineer go, oh my god, that's really difficult, and you explain the same thing to an engineer and they go, oh brilliant. They love it. It's exactly that thing. It's a real mess, fantastic, we can sort it out. That's seen as a kind of exciting challenge rather than a
that's what I'm
doom.
saying. It's just we need to keep it's one of these sometimes if you wander around various bits of the energy sector and and there is a bit of doom and gloom. Oh God, this is difficult. Oh God, this is complicated. This is the best thing that could ever have happened to us.
Right.
Really is brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. At the end of the day, it's most basic. If you're in the energy sector and you make electricity, hey, guess what?
Yeah.
People want it.
Well, that's
a good thing.
Yeah, and that's one of the people I've just interviewed recently from Hyundai Cars said, there's this massive waiting list for the Hyundai Ioniq, and they're soon coming out with another one, the Kona, a pure electric car. And there's a huge waiting list, and there's enormous demand. And he said, look, we're a company that makes cars. Guess what a huge demand is? It's really good. We're really happy about it. All the people in the audience are really miserable because they're waiting for their cars, but he's chuffed to bits because he's got this huge demand. And I think that's a similar thing is going to happen with companies that supply renewable energy, variable tariffs. Those are a lot of companies coming into the market that, I'm very excited as an electric car driver, and I think that's a key point. Is before you have an electric car, you assume you're going to use it like a petrol car. You want to charge it really quickly and go on these huge long journeys. Which occasionally I've driven to Sweden and southern Italy I have a Tesla Model S. That is possible to do. There are chargers all over Europe. It's not a problem at all. But the thing is that is really, really unusual. That is not the normal experience. And what's normally happening is right now my electric car is in the parking space below here, and it's charging. I'm not waiting for it to charge. I'm not hanging around, standing near it, waiting for it to fill up. By the time I get in it, it'll be full, and I'll drive home again, and I won't need to stop on the way home. I won't need to stop for the car, but I may need to stop because I'm a 62-year-old man and I have bladder range, and that's a much more important a challenge to people. So car manufacturers need to come up with a solution to bladder range. Don't have a coffee just before you get in the car is a good clue.
The other, one of the other things we need to, one of the other serious things and serious challenges we need to think about is how you roll this out and it's fair and accessible to everyone.
Exactly.
Okay, so and that is a big challenge. And if you look at what's happened with things like broadband, and you look at what's going on just now with banking, and all of the automation, and one of the big challenges for society is how do people still get access to, or how can they get access to some of these services? You hear frequently, it's a very live debate in Scotland about access to broadband in rural communities, and with transport, you can't get that wrong.
No.
Because it's such a vital part of people's lives, and it is a hugely vital part of keeping the economy alive in rural communities, is the ability to get in and out and get goods and services in and out. So how do you roll out the electrification of transport and make sure everyone has access to it? Right now you kind of suspect that an awful lot of what's going on is in nice suburban towns. There are people getting charging points installed in their homes. There are people buying an electric car as a second vehicle, and that's fine to get the process kick-started, but that cannot be the way it grows. It can't be the way it's rolled out. We need to make sure everyone has the ability to access the electrification of transport. Everyone has the ability to get a hold of charging points, charging facilities, because you will also see, just even simplistically, if you roll it forward, at what point in time do BP, Shell and Esso start shutting down service stations?
Yeah. Soon.
Which again are a massive part of local economies. So that's it's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge, but it's something we need to start planning for and thinking about now, because you don't want this to come back and bite us at a later date.
No.
We don't want to be slowing down the rollout of electric vehicles. We don't want the system not to be able to cope with it, and we also want it to be fair. It has to be fair, and it has to be accessible, because the way we invest in our energy system in the UK, it's paid for by customers.
Yeah.
The way we invest in the grid is it's spread across everyone. So if everyone's paying, everyone has to get the benefits.
Everyone has to get benefits. Absolutely right. Please, I'd like to thank Keith very much for being such an enthusiastic proponent of the new energy dynamic that we're all involved in. Thank you very much for listening. We have to go now. I've been given the old sign. Thank you very much for listening. I'm back here later on this afternoon doing something else. Thank you.